Hey everybody, this is Christopher Talon. I'm the host of Creative Ops, a podcast for creative people, by creative people. This podcast is made possible by Hey Guys Media Group. Check them out, heyguysmediagroup.com. They are the technical wizards who have allowed this podcast to even become a thing in the first place. So if you've ever thought of starting a podcast, check out heyguysmediagroup.com. And also, if you're a human being and you smell bad and need to wash yourself once in a while, check out Baby Farm Soaps. They're only on Facebook, so go to Facebook, type in Baby Farm Soaps, and you'll find this wonderful company from Berea, Kentucky that makes soaps, lip balms, hand creams, all kinds of stuff. And all the things that I just mentioned, I got a package of. That's why those three were fresh in my mind. High quality, organic, quality ingredients. Best stuff out there. You'll love it. Also check out Rivertown Adventures in Lansing, Michigan. They're online. They're online at rivertownadventures.com. The most fun you're going to have outdoors in Lansing, Michigan is at Rivertown Adventures. rivertownadventures.com. I'm not going to say it again. Yes, I am. rivertownadventures.com. All right, my guest today is my brother from another mother, specifically my brother-in-law. So Mike Breymann, he has worked in movies as a visual effects artist. He's worked in virtual reality, doing a lot of the same skills, but, applied to virtual reality. He's done freelance worked with lots of different people on the artistic side, on the production side, all kinds of different things. You'll hear all about that. He's a very smart guy, very nice guy, and obviously just a very creative guy too. Not to mention he also develops software. It goes on and on. Really fun guy to listen to. A lot of wisdom, a lot of insights. And I think you'll enjoy it just because he's a pleasant person to listen to. So enjoy this interview, please, with Mike Breymann. For anybody listening that doesn't know who you are, what's just a simple intro, your name, your current position, and what you do without going into too much depth?
Can I start with you're my brother-in-law? Can we start?
Yeah. That's where the connection is. I don't have some cool connection of people on my Rolodex. It's just whoever happens to be related to me.
Okay, so wait, you want the bio from like the professional just a quick slant on the bio? All right.
Just a quick simple rundown so people listening like, okay, so that's who this guy is.
I'm a guy who is 42 years old. I refer to myself kind of professionally as a visual effects artist or a technical artist or a computer graphics generalist.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a little bit clunky to have three different kind of titles and associations, but that's generally what I do. I make graphics on computers. That's what I do for a living. I've been doing that since I was in my early 20s. And freelanced for a number of years. I live out in California. I live in San Francisco, just north of Golden Gate Park. I'm from Michigan originally. And I've been making pretty pictures on screens for the better part of 20 years now. So that's me.
The place I want to start is college, and then we'll move from college kind of into now, because I think that it's very interesting that you've worked on movies and movies and films, that's the same thing, films and television projects and things that a lot of people might be familiar with. But as a freshman in college, you were looking at going into English as right off the bat, or did you kind of settle on that when you were there, English lit?
I always, from the time I was pretty young, I always just loved to read and write stories. And so that, that kind of naturally lended itself to a major declaration of, English creative writing.
Yeah.
When I was an undergrad. And I guess that you could say that's been kind of a through line for all of my professional career, even though I haven't gone into the business of writing and storytelling per se. Does that make sense?
Whoops, I turned my mic off. Yes. Yeah, that does make sense. So you graduate from school. You've got your degree is English literature, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you graduate from the University of Michigan with a degree in English literature. And do you immediately say, I'm going to California, I'm going to try to break into the movies? Or do you kind of think, at what point does that cross your mind that you're going to go do that while you're still in school, or when you actually have to?
Well, I think I mean, around the time of my junior year of undergrad, I realized that there was only 1 year left, and I had to make a decision about what was going to happen next, right?
Yeah.
And that decision is you either go on to grad school and pursue more of an academic line of things, or you go out into the world and start working. And that's what I kind of mean by when I say I didn't want to go into the business of writing and storytelling. That was the keystone moment, so to speak, right? Where it was like, okay, well, what else are you going to do with your life if you're not
right?
School's done. You don't want to go into more schooling, and you don't want to go into the business of writing and storytelling. So what's next, right? And so at that time, there were Pixar was coming up. There were animated films was clearly going to be the next medium of storytelling, or a new frontier of storytelling. There were a lot of really interesting things happening in film at the time with computer graphics, right? Like some of the seminal films of Jurassic Park, Terminator 2, even Fight Club a few years. I guess that was Fight Club 98.
That sounds about right.
Remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there were amazing things happening with this convergence of kind of photoreal rendering and recreation in the service of storytelling that seemed really like a natural next step for me. And I'd always, aside from writing and storytelling, I'd always had a real interest in computers and technology. And if we want to roll back even further on the timeline to when I was a lot younger, I remember an Apple IIe with a green and black monochrome screen coming home that my dad brought from the university where he worked, and that it was like this little magic box that I got to tinker with, right? And so that was I guess I did mention that I'm 42. I was about to say that really dates me, but yeah, I guess I already revealed that secret. There's this nice convergence of storytelling and artistry and technology that was, for me at that time, clear that it was just a kind of logical next step for me to take. And I also, kind of conveniently or coincidentally, had a strong desire to get out of the Midwest and see new things and try on new hats and have different experiences. And so moving to California was, again, a natural kind of progression of that whole theme.
Would you say, looking back now, that you had a realistic idea of what you were getting into when you moved out west? Or did you have stars in your eyes and think that it was all going to come easy?
I was 23 years old. I had no idea anything of anything, right? Like, who does?
Yeah.
Life is surprising, isn't it?
So did you follow a friend or a girl, or just chase a certain opportunity out west, or how'd you end up actually locating out there?
I started after I graduated that summer, summer 2001. I started emailing, basically cold emailing people and saying, what I was interested in, and also, from the time I was when I was a junior. As an undergrad at U of M, I started building out a portfolio of 3D renderings, which was, my understanding of how you got a job, or, made any kind of first step into that industry, right? And so I started sending that portfolio out, which was, there was no, I was self-taught. There was no academic instruction. It's a horrible portfolio, but
and with that, because I would imagine that there's a lot more resources for somebody to learn right now, like even with just YouTube videos. The last guest that I talked to is a professional artist. He paints the insides of buildings and does murals and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah,
Yeah.
I got a lot of my style from watching YouTube videos. It's like, oh, dang.
Yep.
But at the time that
No,
you get into that, was it all books? Was it like watching, like reading technical manuals or what?
I mean, the internet was a thing in 2000, 2001.
Sure.
There were some resources on there, certainly not to the magnitude that there are now. But yeah, that was the primary resource. And um, I'm trying to remember exactly how that. Well, at any rate, yeah, I mean, it was VHS tapes of animations that you put together, and you quite literally sent them through the physical mail
Yeah.
to somebody on the receiving end who had a VCR. They would
Yeah,
pop
yeah.
it up in a room and make a determination about whether they wanted to call you back or not. And you put your name, your phone number on the sticky label. And I remember getting real, like, quote unquote professional with it by printing out the sleeves for the VHS cases,
Oh, yeah.
and the whole thing. Like, imagine going to a Blockbuster. Like, I tried to simulate that experience for somebody who would receive these cold envelopes in the mail. And yeah, it was just a lot of, like, hunting and pecking for people who I could just send stuff out to. And that isn't entirely dissimilar from the way that you would send out a manuscript or something like that to an
Right.
editor or somebody. I mean, you could make the argument that, like, cold emailing an editor a manuscript that you printed out is just a waste of your time, money, and paper. But
A lot of times it
especially
is.
these, but that kind of understanding of how how to get a job was very, very relevant, right? And so I just kind of translated what I knew into this new industry that I knew nothing about. Clearly,
And
right? I get out to San Francisco and I had to relearn everything that I'd self-taught myself.
well, I was going to say, did you have something lined up professionally here? Or did you just move here and like, I'll just get a job, whatever I got to do to start?
I had an intern. Somebody emailed me back and offered me an internship, an unpaid internship,
Oh, fun.
open-ended, and that they would welcome me with open arms once I landed in San Francisco, and that was it.
That's a big chance, huh? Was that nerve-wracking at the time, or were you young enough to
No, again,
not
I was
realize?
23. I was, what's the what's the risk? And, yeah, no, of course, like, sounded like an amazing adventure. Go out to
Yeah.
California, start a new life, and like, there's no the risk is very low, or maybe maybe that's not the right way to put it. That Not that the risk is low, but that the perceived risk is low.
Yeah,
We'll give it
yeah.
that
You don't have
qualifier.
the family, and you're not risking. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Not as much to lose at the time. um,
Or concept of what could be lost, right?
yeah,
Concept of the world in general. I hadn't traveled much outside of Michigan, and so and again, being 23, it's just a very different a different perspective, I think, on where you want your life to go.
yeah, for sure. So I've got your IMDb pulled up. I'm just curious, what was the first company that you got into, and what were some of the things that you were doing and projects you were working on, like as a, quote unquote entry level job as an intern?
Well, so the intern position, the internship was a digital media company that produced training and materials for other people, for people who wanted to learn people like me who wanted to learn the art and craft of digital media in general, like computer graphics, video production, all a really broad range, right?
That's very interesting. Did that help you? Like, did you pick up a lot just from being in that environment?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, the exchange was, this is an unpaid internship, but you will learn all kinds of actual production expertise and techniques in our program. And in exchange for us giving you this knowledge, you are going to go out there and produce tutorials and training material as you learn for other learners who might
Yeah.
come in the pipe. So it was this weird, it wasn't a pyramid scheme. I wouldn't say that. that. It was, but it was this idea of mutual exchange of effort and time, and education, right? And it was actually it was a really kind of cool business model.
Yeah,
But
that's
that
better
was
than like a credit.
yeah, and there
Yeah.
were and I met a lot of really great people. Some of my first friends in this new city, right, came from the time that I spent there, and I spent as much time as I possibly could there. I also had to make ends meet, so I had to wait tables and do freelance like construction work and all kinds of random things, market research participant,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff that you do just to cobble together some cash to pay the rent.
Especially in a
But
city that is not a cheap place to live already. Well, I
right,
think you already mentioned you're in San Francisco, so
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I spent as much time there as I possibly could. And then when I started getting paying freelance jobs, man, there were a lot of random things. This is many years ago now. I remember doing some architectural visualization for an artist, a Bay Area artist. Some website development. I actually taught some website portfolio building classes at an art college here early on. And then, the first film that I worked on was Sin City in 2004.
Oh, no kidding.
And I moved down to the Central Coast, down to Santa Maria, and lived in a Holiday Inn for 10 months, I think it was. And and worked on Sin City, and that was my first freelance job, my first professional freelance job, and the first one that I actually moved anywhere for.
That's kind of impressive because I mean that was a big budget movie. So to jump in on something like that on your first project, I would think that would be kind of nerve wracking because it's not like some indie thing that maybe nobody will see.
Well, it's a little funny that you say that because it wasn't big budget for the time. It's Robert Rodriguez, right,
Yeah.
who came from Texas and had a very kind of low budget approach to doing really expensive things. Like he was one of the first pioneers of all green screen films, Sin City
Yeah.
being one of the early ones. And so he was kind of a visionary, and certainly like the budgets for any Hollywood film are much bigger than independent film. So I guess it really is all dependent on the scale that we're talking about here. But in terms of Hollywood budgets, I think Sin City was on the lower end of that spectrum. But anyway, I mean I digress. Sorry, what was your question?
Okay. Yeah. No. And then I see that I scrolled down because they have it in like reverse order. Chronologically. Ooh, and then you did Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl 3D. My kids love that.
Yeah.
You got into film independently, not with a company.
Well, okay, yeah. So, I guess it's worth pointing out that even to this day, the film industry is very you work from project to project, right? Like the idea of a company that has it's complicated, right? But in general, a lot of visual effects artists are itinerant. They move around from job to job wherever the projects are.
Uh-huh.
And the typical production schedule is anywhere from like 6 months to a year, right?
Right.
Depending on the size and budget of the film and a lot of different factors. But some artists who stay on staff at a particular facility will just transition from project to project depending on what the facility is able to bring in. But there's a huge contractor base that facilities will ramp up and ramp down for given the production demands. And so there's a lot of movement and a lot of churn, and the idea of, especially for me in those days, of staying at any one company was it wasn't really a reality, right? I just knew that I'd be moving around a lot. So.
Yeah, because I remember a little bit of those days when you were still working in the film industry, anytime I asked, "Oh, what's Mike doing now?" It's, "Oh, well, now he's working with this company. Oh, well, now he's doing something with this company. Well, now he's freelancing." It seemed like it was
Yeah.
kind of a hectic lifestyle. Is that part of the reason why? I don't want to get totally out of this yet, but is that part of the reason why you moved on from that?
I'd say it's part of it. Also, I'm the kind of person that gets antsy, and so that aspect of it at that time and for a number of years was really liberating, really exciting. I could go to a lot of different places. I could meet a lot of different people.
I mean, there was some international travel associated with some of the projects you were doing, right?
Yeah, sure. And so that's all really exciting. But then, it can also get tiring, and it's kind of the age old thing where, it sounds luxurious to work for a company that sends you traveling a lot, but then, you're spending all your time in hotels and at work and don't have any personal connections. And all of a sudden you're like, what, where's my family? Where's my sense of purpose?
Right.
Right. And so the reality of it after a while just becomes a little, it just changes. As life goes on, interests change as well. And that's kind of what happened to me.
Yeah. So before we get completely away from the film and television portion of it, you were part of a team that won an Academy Award, or the team that you were working with did?
Yes.
Right,
yes.
for Benjamin Button?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your role in that, and then also how does a group celebrate an award like that? Like, who actually takes home the trophy and that kind of stuff?
Right. I'm not 100% sure on this. I think the Academy designates. I'm not even going to say technically how the awards are accepted. I'm not sure how that process works. If you petition the Academy, or you apply and then they either accept and nominate you, or whether they independently arrive at a decision about who should receive the award. I'm not sure technically how all that works, but in terms of the work itself on Benjamin Button, I spent a lot of my time building a digital model of Paris, which involved, as you were saying before, some travel over to Paris to go up in a helicopter and shoot photos and then recreate Paris suburb.
And you actually did that? You went up in a helicopter and took pictures and stuff? Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then brought it all back to the Bay Area and recreated Paris in the 1950s. So we rolled back time and it made it look pretty for. I mean, here's a short story about that. A short production story. We had it all planned. We flew out to Paris. We had a week out there, and we knew what we wanted to shoot. Which was the Arc de Triomphe. And when we went up in the helicopter, the days that we were there, every single day was overcast and the visibility was horrible. It was something like, I don't know, half a mile or something terrible, right? So we go up and we have the ideal shot in our minds. We'd mapped it all out in our heads. And we come back and look at all the shots and they're all garbage, right? Like it's just like this foggy, like nobody would put that up on screen. And so we had to work around that and basically do a lot of digital painting and a lot of reconstruction from source photography and things that we quite literally hand painted ourselves. And so I spent a lot of my time building out that digital recreation of Paris for what was effectively, I think, 1.5, maybe 2 seconds of what you call an establishing shot. It's like when the plot changes and there's a beat and you need to reset the viewer or the audience to say okay, we're now in this location, right? So you call that an establishing shot, and there was you don't want to dwell too long on the establishing shot because you want to get into what is the story point that you're trying to tell, right? So a lot of establishing shots are 1.5, 2 seconds long. I think actually in an action film, this is maybe a little bit of trivia here. Somebody timed it once, probably more than one person has timed it, but I think the average shot length in a blockbuster action film is somewhere around 4 seconds. Or something like that. And that when you think about that, you're like, wow, that's a lot of cutting. That's a lot of camera changing pretty rapid camera changing, right? And and
Yeah.
that's typical of an action film. There's like pacing and excitement involved in rapid cuts. But if you've never watched a blockbuster with on mute and just trying to take in the visuals, right? Like it's kind of a weird and jarring experience. It's kind of frenetic, but it's only through like the whole ensemble of audio and voice and music and sound effects that like the story comes together. So I'm going off on a tangent here again, but
no. I love it.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. For me, that's more interesting than an Academy Award, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
My boss went in. Craig Barron, amazing guy who I worked with closely at Matt World Digital on Benjamin Button. He went up on stage and accepted the award with a couple other gentlemen from other companies that were also nominated for Best Visual Effects.
Oh, that's cool. Were there any movies or shows or anything that you worked on that, before we move away from that you want to say like you were especially proud of either the film or what you did in it?
Yeah, my favorite, I think, of all time was with the same company, Matt World Digital, up in Nevada. And I mean, it's my favorite for a number of reasons, but I'll just name a couple. So the film was Zodiac. The director was David Fincher. I'm a huge David Fincher fan and always had been. He was going back all the way to Fight Club, right? Like that was one of the first films with really interesting camera moves that were all digitally created that were in service, like deeply in service of the storytelling, right? And so like that had an immediate hook in me. And I mean, he's an auteur. He's an amazing director, and so I had the privilege of working on his film Zodiac. That's my favorite.
And I see on that one it says environment artist. So you were doing similar type of things where you were creating backgrounds,
building digital environments of San Francisco primarily in the 1970s. Yeah,
it's very cool. You've got a few environment artist credits, and then I see beyond that, it looks like a lot of technical director credits. What's a technical director do?
So the titles are they're a little bit vague and ambiguous. A technical director can mean a lot of different things at a lot of different studios. In general, what it means is somebody who works on the technical side of art creation. And so that could mean lighting, digitally lighting a 3D scene. For me, for many years, it meant doing effects work. So particle simulations, dust, cloud, explosions, all computer generated. And I'm not sure the origin of the the title itself, but I think it kind of lends or suggests something about using more technical approaches to creating the pixels that end up on the screen, as opposed to more artistic approaches, which would be, say, painting or like digital painting, or say physical model work like stop motion animation or something of that nature, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, in general, it's all the same thing when you're talking about. There's a lot of nuance. I don't want to be misleading saying that the specialties there aren't specialties in the field, but a technical director is kind of I guess the short answer is the technical director is a broad categorization of a lot of responsibilities and duties that means different things at different facilities. So
yeah, but when I see technical director, I would just guess basically it means the stuff that you did before you were a technical director, you made sure that the people do that right, more or less. Just, like a normal move up in the world. You go from being the guy that makes something to making sure that people are making it right.
Well, so here's the kind of interesting thing about it. Like, I don't a technical director, it may mean the title may have some significance to some people, but for me, throughout, especially in that time when I was doing a lot of different jobs at a lot of different companies, your credit or your title and your role was less important than the work that we were actually doing, right?
Sure, sure.
And
Oh,
the
yeah.
team that we were collaborating with. So it wasn't like one day like somebody sat me down and said like, you're now going to be a technical director. We're going to give you a bump in salary. You have all these new responsibilities, and we're going to put 15 interns under you. So like manage well. Bon
Yeah.
voyage. You know, it wasn't like that. It was
Here's
like
your hat in your parking space.
you just, yeah, I mean, you like, again, like a very itinerant kind of contractor world where you would move from project to project, and maybe a company would have like an allocation of like, oh, we have headcount for 15 contractors with this title, technical director. And somebody would come in, they'd be like, you're a technical director, and that's what we will list you as in the credits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And so you would just kind of assume the role. I'm being a little bit glib here, but like that, because there is an actual distinction in some very real ways for a lot of people and a lot of companies in particular. But for me, the title was less important than like what I was actually doing, the amount of responsibility and autonomy that I would have on a given shot or sequence of shots, and how I'd be spending my time there. Right.
Yeah. All right. I want to ask one more thing about the film, and then we're going to move on. You worked at Industrial Light and Magic, which is the special effects or the visual effects arm, however you want to call that, of Lucasfilm, right? George Lucas, Star Wars,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Right.
What in your mind was the coolest thing that they had? Because I know it's kind of like a museum in that building as well from the pictures that I've seen of it. What was the coolest thing to you that you saw, like Darth Vader's suit, Yoda, E.T.?
Okay. So, shoot. So I have a very clear picture in my head of the coolest thing. And I'm gonna fumble through the description a little bit of what it was.
Okay.
Because I don't actually remember specifically, and I probably should. And I have in the past. Like I knew this in the past, but okay. Do you remember Ghostbusters 2?
I think so.
I think it was Ghostbusters 2. I'm like 90% sure. Where I think he was okay. This is where I'm really going to stumble through it. An older evil count from like from Eastern Europe from like 200 years ago.
Yeah.
Is summoned back to the earth. Like his spirit is summoned back to the earth as like the doomsayer. And there's a giant painting of him in the library. Do you remember this giant painting?
No,
Okay,
I'm not thinking of it.
This is awful because I mean I should know this a lot better. But there's a moment in Ghostbusters 2 where this giant painting, his eyes kind of glow, and he locks on the main character, and there's like it's known that like this creepy guy or like his spirit is somehow like embodied in this painting. Are you looking it up right now?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. No, Vigo?
Yeah, well, I think, search with a V or something like that.
I thought it was something like that because the one guy's like, it is Vigo.
Yes, Rick Moranis, right? I remember the actor's name. Pretty sure it's Moranis. Moranis? Oh, man.
Yeah, the one that the guy's like, please don't take pictures of this. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes. So he's like the lackey, right? But he's also like a crucial element in the story because he's bringing this evil spirit back to destroy New York, right? Anyway, that painting was in the hallway, and I would walk past it all the time, going to lunch, and it was like I love super creepy and kind of like weird things like that anyway. And so
that's a big picture too, isn't it?
Oh, it's huge. It's dimension wise, I want to say it's like 7 feet tall and like 4 5 feet wide, something like that. Yeah.
I didn't
It's
even
huge.
realize that was a ILM project. Huh.
I mean, there are a lot that you probably wouldn't, right? There, uh, especially when you go to the, well, I mean, it depends on what movies you've seen and what you watch, and everybody's at different points in time on that. But like if you roll back to like the pre-digital era, when when um, a lot of the special effects for big budget films were handled in a physical way. I mean, like
Yeah,
going
with
out on the
camera
lot and
tricks
like,
and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, quite literally like blowing things up and with, explosives, or building physical models and then like crashing them into each other and all that kind of stuff. Island was a very big studio for creating those kinds of effects. They had the resources and the skill and the talent to pull those things off.
One thing that I just learned recently, and if this isn't true, maybe and you could confirm or disconfirm it. I had heard recently that there were several shots from the movie Spaceballs where George Lucas was like, we have some extra footage left over that you might be able to use, and we can help you a little bit if you agree to not market any of these products to compete with Star Wars stuff. And they were like, all right, deal. So a lot of those scenes where you see like the escape pods ejecting off of the ship are like just like cut footage from Star Wars that George Lucas was like, yeah, you can have this, just don't market against us.
Huh, that's interesting. I'd never heard that before.
Yeah. Wouldn't surprise me though. That he seems like he's a pretty smart kind of two moves ahead kind of guy. All right, I want to talk about Glyph too, because that's something that you're still pretty active with, or not as much.
Yeah. So, for context, Glyph is my single member LLC company that I do all of my freelance. Well, it's meant different things at different points in time, right?
Uh-huh.
For a while, it was an entity through which I would do freelance work. I wrote software and sold software commercially through Glyph. I've been a vendor for other companies through Glyph, providing consulting services. So it's kind of evolved over time as I've evolved over time.
Yeah.
But I've had that company since 2007, I believe. Yeah.
And that started, if I remember the way that you explained it to me, you needed better tools to do the stuff that you were doing with, and so you just made it yourself, and then kind of branded that and sold it to other people that did like-minded things.
And it was that shot on Benjamin Button, the para shot that I was telling you about. That when we had to recreate all of this stuff in a way that we never planned to recreate, it became painfully obvious like what we were missing in terms of tooling to build it. So, and because I was primarily responsible for doing the entire digital build of it, I built the tools myself that would help me, achieve what I was really after. And then an extension of that was that it became clear that other people could use these tools as well. So that started Glyph and launched the commercial software marketing and e-commerce and everything else that would happen over the next 10 years.
Yeah. What are all the applications for it? Because I imagine that you've used it for film, television stuff, but I imagine people could use it for any kind of digital art projects, or for video games, or for I don't even know what else.
So it's a pretty niche tool. It's and I'm going to nerd out a little bit here on
Go for it.
On the kind of work that I specialize in when I build environments is basically digital matte painting in a 3D world, right? So are you familiar with matte painting, or what the term is, or how the history of it? Okay, so before computers, the way that you would accomplish a lot of all kinds of effects. I mean, it's a really deep subject, but historically, matte painting would happen on glass, and then you would have layers of glass that you would shoot your camera through, and you would light the glass, and it was a very physical thing that ended up on film, right? And then in the digital revolution, the painting of those pixels was happening entirely in the computer. You no longer needed the glass, and you could go straight to film from the computer, right?
Right.
But it was still a 2D medium, right? You're still working with essentially layers, much like you would work with a physical pane of glass. You were working in Photoshop layers now to create these matte paintings,
Okay.
and when
Well, to make it super simple, is it kind of like when you're making something in just like even like just a simple art editing or word art project on like Microsoft, and you're like bring this to front, push this to back, like you're just kind of like creating layer over layer of things?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're creating layers over layers, and those layers can mean different things for different purposes, right? Maybe your camera is moving subtly to the left, and so you want to have a little bit of parallax between the foreground tree and the background mountains. So the background mountains are on one layer, and the foreground tree is on the other layer, and then the visual effect is that they slide against each other when you translate the camera, right?
Right. To give that idea of like depth and perspective and stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and then, commonly you're compositing those backgrounds, those matte paintings with a foreground element that was shot against green screen or blue screen, which is, your actor. And you can do all kinds of things there that place the actor in a place that he or she never was physically, right? So it's all illusion, it's all magic. And then when the digital revolution came and moved from 2D to 3D, and more work started happening in 3D because it afforded us to do more kinds of complicated camera movements, for example, and achieve other kinds of effects. Again, going back to Fight Club, one of the films that really impressed me early on was just how elaborate those camera moves are. And if you haven't seen it in a while, I'd encourage you to go back and watch it, because this was, I think it was 98. I could be wrong about that. Was when
the timing
it came
sounds
out.
about right, because that was right when I was starting high school.
And I mean, Fincher did all kinds of crazy things, like dropped cameras through floors. I don't know if you remember that, the camera move. I think it goes all the way down to the basement level and then swings around and goes inside of a white truck that was holding a bomb. That was, it was just this really elaborate description of what was, to help tell the story. And this visual description, I guess, is a way to put it, right?
Yeah.
But all of that movement from 2D into 3D created a massively more complex way of interacting and designing and thinking about space and thinking about how to build things, right? And so with any kind of massive technological shift like that, the tooling gets built by the people who are actually trying to do the work and to create the artistry and to innovate and to solve problems. I mean, I think this is true for any craft, regardless of what it is or what your expertise level, right? You start designing and building the tools that help you do your work better. And that's essentially what the matte painting toolkit was for the 3D world, right? A way of doing 3D matte paintings that made it easier, more efficient, less manual labor, less burdensome on the artists who were trying to work in 3D.
That makes sense. The military, when I was in the Navy, working as a helicopter maintainer, I remember somebody said that the Navy would give people money, like there was a set amount of money, if you could create a tool that hadn't been used that made a job easier, or if you could like rewrite a certain step in a technical manual that was more efficient than the way that it was done before. So like they were constantly encouraging the people that always did the work to like, find better ways to do it or better tools to do it with. So that makes sense.
What were some of the tools that came out of
Oh,
that
you know
program?
what? I I never personally saw anybody take advantage of that, and there was a time when I was in charge of the technical publications. I was the technical publications librarian, and I had asked, have you ever other people? I was like, have you ever seen anybody make good on this? And they're like, no, it happens like a couple times a year, if that, like worldwide. So
Is there like
yeah,
a big celebration when it happens then? Is it
yeah.
like,
I mean,
hey, we got one?
I would think, yeah, if they're just handing out like $5,000 anytime can think of a better way to do something, it's probably been thought of. uh,
Got to up the
okay.
ante.
So does the stuff that you call them matte paintings, does that translate directly into virtual reality? Because to catch people up in case we didn't directly say it, you went from working in film to and also making some software for that, and then you left and started a virtual reality company.
Mhm.
And are most of those skills directly transferable from what you were doing with movies to what you were doing with virtual reality, or was there
Yeah,
another learning curve?
a lot are sure. I mean, you can think of virtual reality as just a different medium, much like you can think of say video games as a different medium, right? But like
Right.
tools that you're using are all the same. I mean, there's of course a lot of differences in technique and approach and how you problem solve and the things that you care about, the constraints that you're under. A big one, for example, when you're designing for a shot in a film, a single frame can take many minutes, or in some cases hours, to render, to resolve, right, to the final pixels. But in video games or in VR is even more aggressive. In video games, you need to render at 30 or 60 or 90 hertz, 90 frames a second, right? So it needs to happen in real time, as they say. It needs to happen instantaneously. And so the choices that you make and how you think about um, the um, the end result is very different. But the authoring tools themselves are very similar.
Everything that you've done, well, I don't know a whole lot about what you're doing now. We will get into that. But a lot of the things that you've done, there's been a serious storytelling element to it. Whether it's directly with working with a film that's, has a very obvious beginning, middle, and end, or virtual reality where you're creating an experience for somebody. Is that something that a lot of people in the field that you're in, that you work with, do they have that same storytelling connection, or do you think that that comes from specifically having like a literature background?
Um, no, I think it's pretty common. I think a lot of well, the um, people a lot of my coworkers, a lot of the people that I've come across in the industry have a real strong passion for not just storytelling but a visual element of storytelling, and that means different things to different people, right? So some people really love to um, say just light a scene, right? And like that's what they're into. They love like creating the mood, the visual style
Yeah.
of a particular shot. um, but there's all kinds, right? There are it's also true that there are a lot of people in the industry who are much more people, right? And are in the industry as part of like the connective tissue of making all of this stuff work, right? So you've got artists and engineers for sure, and they're largely driven by different aesthetic motivations, or have different aesthetic motivations. But there's also like producers and uh, coordinators and directors who work in a different way and have. I think everybody on some level is invested in telling a great story, but how their skills apply and their particular niche or interest can vary, right?
Yeah. Okay. So the skills are pretty similar that you're working with going from one to the other. Did you just kind of get tired of the movie film thing, or did you specifically see VR as just like an exciting new opportunity, or you wanted to be
More
one of
the
the first
latter.
people to get in on it, or
More the latter. I mean, I remember when I first put on a Oculus development kit headset and was kind of immediately transported into this other world that, like, it was clear to me in that moment that there was this whole new kind of artistic medium that was going to open up, and there were all new rules that were going to apply, and
yeah.
it was very much uncharted territory. And so since I was at a particular point in my career where it made sense to transition, because I've been doing the same thing for long enough. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, and as you know me very well, I get kind of antsy just doing the same thing over and
Hmm.
over and over again. So it felt like this was just like in the mid 90s or late 90s, early 2000s, there was a lot of stuff that needed to be figured out about how to work with 3D and how to tell stories like Pixar was telling with
Hmm.
all 3D characters, and how to design new camera language and cinematography in Hollywood. Like, it felt like that era was kind of coming back in a new, not even industry yet, right? Like, it was in 2013, 2014. It was it wasn't even clear like what it was, right? It was just like, it was this crazy device that like had some very real emotional hook, and it had some very, very obvious advantages and unique capabilities, but where it was all going to lead was, anybody's guess. So that was in part exciting, very exciting too, and I naturally gravitate to things like that are new and different and unsolved, right?
Yeah. But at that point, you're older, you've got people in your life that are dependent on you. Was there a sense of like, okay, well, you know what? After a certain amount of time, we should have some money coming in, or was it just a really throwing a Hail Mary and praying and saying, let's hope this works out? How much risk was involved in leaving a job that, a lot of people would say, you were working at ILM? That's awesome. Why would you want to leave? To
Hmm.
go and start this new thing in a field that's kind of untested.
I don't know if I have a great answer there. I think the only thing that I can say is that I've always been more interested in um, new opportunities, uncharted territory, things that opportunity areas where I can learn and grow and do something different. Those
Mm-hmm.
have had a very powerful gravitational pull for me. And um, if I feel like I'm just executing on learned knowledge, or uh, not growing in any way, I start to get antsy. And so, like, yeah, I guess, I mean, the short answer to the question is I was I guess maybe aware of, um, well, I don't even know if I would totally say that. It didn't feel like a huge risk to me.
Yeah.
It didn't feel scary. It didn't feel like, I was ready. I was ready for something different, and so I just leapt into it.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I know. I know that my sister, your wife, has said to me before that she's always admired about you is you don't look at a risk as a chance to fail, but as an opportunity. And a lot of the impetus for starting this podcast came from I started writing a novel after I got sidelined from teaching from having too many kids of my own, and that just started opening up a lot of opportunities for me. And then I started thinking, like, man, why doesn't everybody do what they would just really want to do? And I think for a lot of people, it's just that risk side of things is so scary. Um,
Did it feel that way to you?
Well, not really, but I mean, I was pushed out of the job that I was doing by the need to be a stay-at-home dad. So for me, it was more like I need to do something else or I'm going to lose my mind. And I was like, well, you know what? I've been saying since I was a kid, I'm going to write a novel someday. Now I've got the time, do it. And that parlayed into the podcast and then meeting lots of cool people that I wouldn't have otherwise met and having conversations like this. So it took me, taking just life forced me into the risks that I took that ended up paying off. But you seem to take them willingly. Have you always kind of had the personality of like, I don't know what this is going to be, but let's try it? Or did it kind of come on you with the age and experience?
So, this is where it's a little tricky, right? Because I don't self-describe as some kind of daredevil, or I'm like kind of I'm more the person who will step back and watch somebody else leap first, figure out
All right, well, that didn't work out. How can we make that better?
Yeah, how might I leap differently? so it's not like I am Evel Knievel. Or somebody who willingly just like takes a plunge, but I do think that I've always been the kind of person, even going back to we were talking about undergrad earlier, right? And what I wanted to do after undergrad, there was no question that like leaving Michigan and moving to California for an unpaid internship and trying to figure it out from there was what I needed to do, right? And it just followed naturally that seemed right. And so I guess part of it is just like an intuition or a feeling that, okay, yeah, this seems like something that I want to pursue, and then I'm mentally committed to it. There's not a whole lot of like hemming and hawing or second guessing when I get those feelings, but certainly there are a lot of, I'm a little bit nervous to jump full force into things that I don't have that feeling about, right?
Well, sure, that's probably just good intuition, right?
I don't know, call it what you will.
All right, I'm gonna finish talking about the stuff that you're doing now, but I want to ask you a little bit about freelancing, because it's a world that I've recently stepped into myself with blogging and some just general web content and editing type of stuff. What kind of, because you said that some of the jobs that you've had and that you've done recently were freelancing. What kind of freelancing jobs do your skills apply to? Because I know you've worked with different artists that specialize in different mediums. What kind of art do you make, and like what kind of skills do you bring in terms of collaborations?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is building worlds at the end of the day, building worlds that are either very familiar to people, places like recreating places that everybody knows, such as Paris, for example. In other cases, it's building completely fictional and abstract worlds. And it really comes down to the vision for the project, whether it's somebody who I personally want to work with, and there's a good relationship or connection from the other side as well, right? So the kind of work is really broad, but if I were to categorize it, it would be environment creation, synthetic computer graphics environments.
What kind of stuff do you get into working with people that do, more physical type art?
Not much, actually. Very little of that. It's mostly digital, all and intended for digital targets.
So, what kind of projects have you worked on that get outside of the range of something that you would see on a TV screen or a movie screen?
Personal projects or professional projects?
Both.
Not many professional projects these days. Personal projects. Well, I'll just say this: like the kinds of things that I really enjoy doing on a personal level are mostly these days coding and creating tools that enable others to do the kind of work that I've done in my career. I find that like really fulfilling. There's a very strong creative side to coding, and especially if I'm doing it on my own and I don't have any other product directives except for my own interests and ambitions. It's very liberating, and there's a kind of rigor and sensibility to coding that is it's on the opposite end of the spectrum from the subjectivity of like whether something up on screen looks good or not, or looks correct, right? There's a lot of judgment and subjectivity when you look at a piece of art and say I like it or I don't like it, right? And that's in some ways wonderful and a great way to spend time investing in putting something out there that you hope other people like. On the other end of that kind of creative spectrum is in the coding and engineering and more technical side, the satisfaction of knowing that you got a solution right, or that it is broadly applicable to people in a way that enables them to do their own work better, or to be better artists, or to see things differently, so on and so forth. And so personally, that's the kind of stuff that I really enjoy spending my time doing these days.
Yeah. And does most of that happen then under the Glyph banner, or
yes,
not necessarily?
Exactly. Yeah? Yep. Anything that I would release does, for sure.
Yeah. Do you have like your own stash of things that are just like your own personal tools that you don't share with people?
Oh yeah.
Or?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to? Can you tell me about any of those, or are those just top secret?
Oh, it's boring. Let's not talk about that.
All right. Well, do you have any other? Just for anybody who's thinking about getting into freelancing, do you have any general tips? The last thing that I heard from my last guest, Zack Snyder, he said, if you're going to get into freelancing, regardless what it is, make sure that you are really good at communicating with people, because you have to be able to produce what they want, but you also have to be able to tell them when what they want isn't realistic.
That's some great advice. Yeah. I mean, communication, relationship building, is, I mean, that's a lifelong craft in and of itself. Right. And so there's the stuff that you put out there, the stuff that you do for your job. But absolutely. I mean, this doesn't go just for freelancing. It's for positive, associations and life in general, like good
in a
communication
marriage
style.
and a friendship and anything. Yeah.
Being a good coworker in a massive corporation, yes, it's excellent advice. But I think that it's especially important in freelancing, because you have to communicate on a number of different levels that fall outside of your area of expertise. For example, like you need to be able to communicate on the money level, right? Like how you're getting paid, how you talk about negotiations and contracts, with things you care about, things you're willing to let go, why you care about them, why you're willing to let them go, and then just in presenting your own work, removing yourself from the process and understanding what your client is looking for, being receptive to their needs, even if you disagree with them, knowing when to fight for something you believe in as opposed to relinquish control. These are all, there's lots of little tests in every professional engagement, right? Anyway, so I'm rambling now, but I'm basically echoing. Who did you say your last speaker or your last guest was?
His name's Zack Snyder, and actually, his episode just came out today. But yeah, you should check him out. His stuff is incredible. He's done a couple of murals inside some different buildings where he's painted the walls and the ceilings, and in some places like the furniture and the floor. It's really amazing.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for you, like how's it been? What are some of the lessons and takeaways that you've had? And I do have one that I'll come back to. That's my own. I'm not just parroting Zack Snyder, but but no, I'm curious for you since yeah, just what's been one of the main takeaways?
Yeah, hold on just 1 second. I'll edit this long silence out, but I have to plug this computer in. It's about to die. I didn't realize it wasn't plugged in.
All right.
Okay, there, we're good. For me, so far in my very young paid career as a freelancer, well, the one thing I'm trying to figure out right now is like how much I can communicate without getting annoying. Because I got hired to do a month's worth of weekly blogs. And so I've got the first one. I sent it to him and I was like, if this one's good, let me know. And I'll keep moving forward with this style and tone. And it's been a couple of days and I haven't heard that there was anything wrong with it. So I'm like, well, I guess I should just move forward, or should I follow up? Or, so for me, that's the part of the communication that the line I'm trying to straddle is, be a good communicator, but don't be annoying, like constantly tapping on the shoulder. Oh, what about this? What about this? You know what I mean? So that's the line I'm trying to straddle right now. I don't know if I've learned a lot yet. One thing I'm learning right now is when you get busy, it tends to like get really busy. So I'm learning to be direct with people when I say I don't have time to do this, or I can do this a little bit, but I can only commit a little bit of time to it.
Sure. Yeah.
I like to say yes to things.
Hard. Yeah.
I like to say yes to things, but I can't do everything quality if I do everything that people ask me to do.
Right. Right.
So
yeah. And knowing where that line is and where to apply efforts and when to step off the gas, that's a tricky thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Especially when you've got a wife and kids that also want your attention.
Of course.
I could work all day and all night if nobody was bugging me.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, kind of thinking about your question, I don't remember how you phrased it. Was it a piece of advice? Was that the?
Yeah. If there's anything that you would tell a freelancer just who's starting out and needs a little pat on the back, but also go get them kind of a.
I think it's important. Yeah, I think it's important to invest in yourself, and whatever that means to you. Like invest in the time, the education, the tooling, the relationships. Right, like invest in the things that you actually care about, as opposed to taking jobs to take a job and get things back. Now, don't get me wrong. We all have to take jobs to, make ends meet, especially freelancing is your full-time job, right?
Sure.
Like there's always, we don't always have the luxury of doing what we love. But I think the important thing is having an eye, always like doing a check-in and having an awareness and an eye towards those things that we really want to be doing with our careers, because it's easy to get lost in the noise, right? It's easy to, as you were just kind of alluding to, right? You have, different voices coming in and saying like, hey, can you do this for us? Can you do that for us? And if you quickly just start filling up your calendar with things that people want you to do, you can, I think, lose sight of what it is that you really want to be doing, and where you want, and years could slip by and you've just been kind of moving around from place to place. That's the kind of crazy thing about freelancing, is that like there's so many different directions that you can go, that if it's not like kind of considered and curated and intentional, it can be wayward and feel, I think, purposeless. I mean, like that's what it's felt like for me at times, right? When
well, I mean, some of those big career changes, like you were talking about, maybe you felt like, these projects are all right, but it's just.
Is there something else I want to be doing? Yeah, like what do you want to? Yeah, what do you want to be doing with your life? What do you want to be doing? And that's, I think that is kind of the beauty and the curse of freelancing, is that it in in a lot of ways, it opens up possibilities to be very self-directed and to determine the course of your own future.
Mm.
But on the other end of the spectrum, it can feel, I think, a lot of the time very confusing about like what is the right way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, so I think, kind of investing in yourself and building up your own skills, and just always kind of like doing that check-in with like what do I really want to be, where do I want to be developing as a freelancer, and and not always being curious about what might be coming around the bend that you could tap into and learn from, and use to innovate for the next group of people who are going to follow behind you, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was a coherent thought. That was kind of like a
It worked for me, man. I liked it.
it was a little bit of a tangential rambling thought, but whatever. That's what I got.
It worked for me. All right. Well, the last subject that I want to talk with you about is just travel, because you're a guy that's professionally and personally gone and seen some cool places. What are some of the, assuming people can get back to regular travel soon, hopefully, what are some of the cooler places that you've seen, either personally or professionally?
Oh, man. Yeah.
That maybe go unrecognized by most people?
Oh, that's
everybody wants to see the Eiffel Tower, and you've seen that, but
well, everybody comes from different backgrounds and experiences too, right? So the things that I say are interesting to me might be very well. Let me just give an example. One of my favorite places was Nicaragua, especially on the coast of Nicaragua. But maybe for somebody who has lived in Central America nearby, like visiting Nicaragua, isn't that interesting?
Right.
Right.
Most of my listeners are from North America.
Okay. Well, it's good to have that.
Some in Ontario, some in Quebec. I think just recently I've had some in Ireland, but none in South or Central America.
Yeah. I honestly, if I were to just like throw a dart on the board, I would be happy if it landed anywhere in Central or South America. There's so much to see, so much amazing culture, and food, and just a variety of and richness of experiences that you can have there. That so I mean, I'll just rattle off a few places that I personally love. Patagonia, all along the eastern side of Brazil, near the water, some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. Montevideo in Uruguay, I think, is a really, really fun and interesting city. That's one that I think is maybe not on the map for a lot of people.
As soon as you said it, I was going to ask you where it was, but you said Uruguay, so.
Yeah. Hiking in the Andes in Peru would be on the top of my list as well. That's the Andes are unmatched. They're some of the most majestic mountains in the world, and there are many majestic mountains in the world. So not to necessarily quantify them.
I was saying, you already threw Patagonia out there, and I've not been to Patagonia, but oh man, I saw a documentary about it. Might have been on Netflix. But it was about Patagonia and the story behind the guys that started the clothing company and all that stuff too. Beautiful place, and a really interesting story behind that clothing company too. Yeah.
I mean, speaking of mountain ranges, even the Canadian Rockies, north of Banff, going into Jasper, that's one of the most beautiful drives I've ever done, around ice fields. Parkway or Pathway? I think it's Parkway. Icefields Parkway is stunning. Absolutely stunning. But then, yeah, I mean, that there are a lot of really amazing experiences I've had in the Pacific Northwest, just hiking as well. I mean, we've got the Sierra Mountains here in California, never cease to disappoint me, and the Cascades up north in Washington are beautiful as well. Very, very different, very very kind of diverse terrain. But yeah, those are some of my picks. I look forward to backpacking again someday. It's been a few years.
Yeah.
Having a kid does that to you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Even now with, let's see, my youngest now is 5. We can get out and do some trips, but like to go out and do anything really rugged is still kind of
Yeah.
iffy.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Yeah.
can do some rugged stuff, but not like days of hiking rugged, but like an hour and a half in type rugged.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, shoot, man. I've run through just about everything that I had to talk to you about, and well, we've been doing it for a little over an hour. But,
What's going on with you freelancing these days? I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but aside from the podcast, I think you mentioned that you're starting some professional blogging. Is that right?
Yep. I just got my first paying client blogging. I've got a couple other clients that pay me in like goods rather than money. So,
like what are some of the goods you get?
Well, the first one was the podcast. So the podcast company that produces this is Hey Guys Media Group, and the guys that started that had me on their podcast early when I had just finished writing the book that I am trying to get out there into the world right now. And they were like, "Hey man, you should start a podcast." And I was like, and they're like, "We're actually going to start a company producing podcasts. We can give you a good deal." I was like, "I can't really afford it." They're like, "All right, write our blogs and then we'll just produce your show for writing blogs." And then another company is going to give me hot sauce in exchange for writing blogs.
Oh man,
So
I love a good hot sauce. You know that.
yeah. And I get some stuff from some of the podcast sponsors for free, but like we'll see where it goes from there. I've had a couple other people ask me about doing some web content and editing on a existing website for somebody who's got a significant online following and does a little bit of online retail too. So we'll see.
That's interesting, man. So are you leaning more into like copywriting and that kind of stuff, or do you want to do like where do you want to take it next?
You know, I don't have a firm idea in my mind of where the professional writing will go, because for me the dream of all of it, all the creative stuff, first and foremost, is to be a novelist. So all the writing that I do now is just as a means to keep the focus on writing so that I can keep just writing and, putting out stuff for people, and then also writing my fiction on the side. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll get some money from fiction, and then I can kind of shift my focus completely into that. But yeah, I want to keep doing the podcast, keep doing the writing, and then this kind of writing is good practice and just another step towards kind of keeping me here rather than having to go work for somebody else.
Yeah,
keeping me doing my other creative stuff too.
That really resonates with me. The more you can lean into the things that you care about and get to that place. I mean, this is the other thing. It's like you don't ever really arrive at one place, right? Like it's just a constant evolution of interests and projects and whatever else. I think that was, when I was younger, I always kind of thought about like some kind of end goal of like arriving. But like when you become a novelist and you're, like that supporting you full time, it's not like that's it, right? Like then you got more books to write, and you got like marketing and touring and public speaking, and like, it just continues to evolve, right?
And that sounds like, honestly, the writer's life, like the novelist life, sounds great to me. I get 8 months where I don't have to see anybody. Then I go on a book tour for 2 weeks, see a bunch of people, do a bunch of public speaking, get all that out of my system, and then go back to 8 months of not seeing anybody. You know what I mean? Get it out, because I like being around people, but then I'll get sick of it pretty fast too. So get that out of my system, and then just leave me alone and let me write.
Do you know what a typical PR cycle is for a book? I mean, I'm sure it depends on the book and like the name behind it and everything else. But is it really just 2 weeks out of the year, or is it more like you got like
It all depends. Like there's
Yeah.
some people that will probably, unofficially tour on and off all year long. Like if there's a Comic-Con in a big city market, they'll go to it and try to sell some books and get some stuff out there. So yeah, the big name guys like Stephen King, John Grisham, I think those guys will typically go on the road for like 2 to 3 weeks, hit some TV shows, hit some radio shows, do that kind of thing. But for the lesser known or the independent, I think it's kind of a nonstop grind of just trying to get on podcasts. I got these books here that people have come on my show and they've sent me cool signed copies of their books. And that's what they do. They're on social media every day. They're trying to find podcasts to get on and making connections with other writers and cross promoting each other's stuff. So
what's that? Awesome. I've been looking at that easel in the back corner there this whole time. What is that? Is that stand that you have them on?
That easel is actually it was a bench that came with a dining set, the first dining set that me and Rachel bought when we got married, very cheap. And then when we got home, when we moved from Florida back to Michigan, we took it apart and then had to put it back together again, but we didn't have all the parts to put it back together. So I cut it apart and turned it into an easel because I needed something to put my writing on so that when I took my handwriting and then transcribed it, I wasn't looking down and craning my neck all the time. So.
Well, I think that's a good way to wrap this up. We've gone full circle from your DIY microphone
to my DIY easel.
Yeah.
Yep. It's the whole garden of DIY, cheap as you can get it. That's my office.
Nice.
and crumpled up paper on the floor.
Oh, classic. There you go.
It's officially a writer's office. I've got weeks worth of crumpled up paper that my wife is dying for me to get rid of, but we don't have any rats yet. So,
well, this was fun. It was good talking to you.
Yeah, this was awesome, man. We gotta keep in touch more. I know we always say that, and it's hard with the time change, but we will. We're doing better now than we were, especially with the kids. Man, those kids love seeing each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Anytime I'm like, hey, anybody want to try call baby no? They're like, yay! So even if we don't get you, just trying to get a hold of you guys, the kids are like, well, you tried. All right, good job, Dad.
Okay, moving on.
We love you. Well, tell my sister I said hi.
I will.
Tell my niece I said hi. Take care of yourself. Whole extended family. Tell them all I said hey to.
Same for me.
All right. It was good talking to you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Take care. Thanks so much. Bye. 25
seconds. Here we go. Thank you to HeyGuysMediaGroup.com for making the show possible. Go check them out. HeyGuysMediaGroup.com. Baby Farm Soaps out of Berea, Kentucky. Go to Facebook and check out Baby Farm Soaps. And Rivertown Adventures in Lansing, Michigan. Go to rivertownadventures.com. Please rate and review this podcast.